Welcome to the Undeniable Culture Podcast, where we talk about business, the business of creativity, and how culture guides what we create. Today, my guest is Aigbe. She's an engineer, founder, and connector. She's the CEO and founder of Hangyo, an innovative clothing company. Thank you so much for being here, Ayo.
Hi, Jonathan.
I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a long time coming. Even though I didn't know. I didn't know this until 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I did really spring it on you.
Yeah. But I'm happy to be here.
And you're one of the communicators that I admire most.
Oh.
And I really wanted to have you on the podcast and kind of give your perspective on how you've come to be this amazing, female founder doing some amazing things in your space.
Thank you.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about how you went from being an engineer to a fashion mogul. Right.
Wow. No small feat there. Okay, so with engineering, I've always gravitated towards it. And I knew this really in middle school when STEM classes, like specifically algebra, were the only things that really made sense. And then my history and my English classes, I just struggled in them. Like, I remember in English class, there was like a way where you could write a long page paper. And even still with all of those like tools and things to make it easier, it was a no. But in math class, I would literally do my test twice just for fun, just to try out different ways to solve it. So I knew kind of early then that I gravitated towards more of the STEM. And then in high school, I learned about biomedical engineering and how those are the people that create the pacemakers and the hearing aids. And I was like, that is so cool, like getting to build something that helps someone. And so for college, I decided to continue down that track and pursue electrical engineering, which was like more higher level. I could go into more things, not just biomedical, and just like had tons of fun, like getting to learn all the things I've learned. Hasn't always been easy, but it's always been really interesting and fascinating. And it's felt like this quest that I need to like get to the end of. And I do appreciate also that with engineering, that there is multiple ways to solve it, but there's like, it's like a kind of, there's an answer towards the end. Whereas like with English, it was just so subjective. And I was like, no, just no, it didn't make sense. Very much a left brain. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And how did that kind of lead up to you starting to realize that you had a passion for fashion and clothing? And where did that come from, from being the engineer to getting into that?
Yeah, I've always liked to use clothing as a form of self-expression. I think it's a powerful way to present yourself in the world and to communicate to people something without even saying a word. And I think also people appreciate when you kind of have your own personality or like your own style. And so that really didn't come into fruition until like, I would say college. And then I really delved deep into it freshman year when I had the opportunity to start Hangyo, and I started to learn more about fashion and just all the intricacies of it. And that has kind of evolved since. But I would say it started like kind of, younger.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And the ideation process, right? Creating your first product, how did that happen? And then what did you think it would turn into, right? Because when you're early on in the startup world, right, you're creating a new product, a new business. Sometimes it really starts with just like a single thought. And you're just like, I'm going to go for it, right? But then it turns into something different. How did that process go for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, my story with starting Hangyo started with pure annoyance and irritation. If I'm being very straight up with you, I remember walking into my closet, my freshman dorm closet, pulling out my favorite sweater to go out on a Friday night and seeing that my favorite sweater had shoulder bumps on it. And I was like, what in the world is this? Like, this should not be happening. I have places to be, people to see. And I tried different things to try and take out the shoulder bump. None of it worked. Talked to friends. Their solutions didn't work. And just was kind of frustrated because I had spent my money to pay for this. And it was, again, clothing was something that tied to self-expression, and so me not getting to wear it was an issue.
Yeah.
I can't fully express myself. At least that's what I thought back then. And so that led to the ringing question in my head of why does this problem exist, and there has to be a better way. And that was really kind of the catalyst, the Pandora's box of, okay, how can I fix this? Because this problem shouldn't exist. And so I had the opportunity to explore it, that problem, and dabbled into different ideas and ended up landing on a bendable hanger. And that came from remembering that I used flexi rods to curl my hair, which I don't know if you've seen flexi rods. Have you seen flexi rods?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So flexi rods, yeah, I usually use them to curl your hair. And I thought, okay, like, what if we could put that same thing kind of into a hanger? Because, like, if hangers are bendable, then you wouldn't have to worry about the shoulder bumps. And if you put resistant material, then they wouldn't fall off. And the light bulbs just started to go off and go off. And I made a prototype of it just to see, okay, hey, would this work on my clothes? Would this work for other people? I did some testing, and those initial trials were pretty positive. And then I shared it with more people through a product video, and then that's really when it caught steam, and people were like, oh, where can I buy this? And I'm like, where can you buy this? Like, this is a rinky-dink prototype. Like, are you sure you want this? But that was the transition of like, okay, I think I have something more in my hand. I'm young, like, this problem is exciting. Why not go for it and see if I can make it into more? And then what kind of helped me throughout over the years is doing customer discovery, talking to people, understanding how deep this pain point is and how people were willing to spend their hard-earned dollars to solve it.
Yeah. And, I have, we've kind of had experience together of going through those, speaking to clients and understanding what it is they do.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing how you've been able to have this people first approach, right? You're always very in tune with your clients. You're always very in tune with what their wants and needs are, and connecting yourself with what those issues are and providing solutions has always been a cornerstone of your process. What kind of started you in having that approach with your organization? Did it happen early on, or was it something you recognized that was more of a need later when you were making the product?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of my natural tendency to try and connect with people and to be empathetic, to understand, like, okay, where are you coming from and why? And so I think, like, as I was doing it, I didn't really understand that it was more of a people first approach. But as I leaned into it, I started to see, like, okay, I'm starting to hear more from people and gather data, and I'm creating something that they actually want. But yeah, I think it's just like where I naturally trend. I love conversation, love listening and really getting to know who people are. And that has translated into how I carry out my business and how I see my customers as someone that I want to serve and make their lives better. And a lot of that always comes down to, for me, at my point of view, comes down to listening, like genuinely listening. What are they saying?
That's important.
Holding space for that. Yeah, that's very, very important. How will you solve someone's issues if you don't listen to them? How will you solve someone's issues if you are not empathetic? And so I've kind of taken that strategy because it's like been helpful in me creating things that actually help people and make an impact.
Yeah. I have always come from like a service-based business, and the organizations that I'm a part of are always very service-based. Even if we are providing a product, it's very custom and very unique to that particular client. And you coming from the product space, right? It's good to see that we both have that we keep the customer in mind first, and that's what's really important. And keep maintaining that throughout is key.
Quick plug. Speaking, like, to add on to what you're saying, I will never forget my experience at your family's restaurant. Like, I don't forget, 3 to 4 years ago. I will never forget it, because I think it was like 3 of your family members came to like help us and serve us. It was a big group of us.
Yeah.
And they were so warm and kind and just like, how can we serve you and help you and make sure you have a good experience? Like, and I mean, the food was amazing, but like the service there was like, can't even forget that. And I think that speaks to like, whenever you have a people first approach, you leave unforgettable experiences for people.
Yeah, and that's all it's about. You hit it just right. It's the experience that you want them to come away with, right? Because if they have a fantastic experience, they're gonna share in return, and they're gonna elevate your brand even further,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So I know that you've been a part of accelerator programs and these startup organizations, and I wanted to get your perspective on what those experiences were like, and specifically on pitching. Right, I think you've developed a fantastic repertoire of information on your organization, right?
Hmm.
And you deliver it with such confidence, with such vigor, and you're passionate about it, and you make people feel that.
Mm.
Where did that come from? Is that something that the accelerator really added to your experience?
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate it always. And definitely, because in the accelerators, oftentimes we had a demo day where we
Mm-hmm.
had to pitch. So throughout those experiences, or throughout the program, I was often practicing my pitch, refining it.
Yeah.
But really, my first kind of intro into pitching started in the entrepreneurship program that I started Hangyo in. And that was like my first foray into actually pitching a business idea. And I remember having a whole script, like just line for line what I was going to say. And I did my best not to read it. I read some of it, but I was just remember my visceral reaction was just shaky. Like I was just so nervous. And I later did like throughout kind of starting Hangyo back in 2017, I've done different programs. I pitched for Future Founders in the fall of 2017, and that was like a big deal, like competition to pitch at. And then I did the Texas Tech Accelerator, which is where we got to meet and work together.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, I had to pitch. I did Mass Challenge. We did Mass Challenge.
Yeah. That was so long ago.
You're a big part of my journey. And I had to pitch to get into that, and then afterwards pitch for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, those experiences, they have helped me refine like, okay, what are you building? Who are you building it for? And why in the world does it matter? Getting that really, really clear. And as far as process, how I've done it is I've mostly taken kind of like the standard model that they've given us, like
Yeah.
the problem solution, market, so on and so forth. And I've done my best to create a story around it and infuse emotion, because inherently what we're building at Hangyo is something that's more than just like clothing. It's also your clothing matters to you. It's a form of self-expression, or maybe you got it from a family friend, or maybe it means something more to you. And really tried to like infuse that throughout the pitch. And so like some things I would do, like for example, in the beginning of a skit, or the beginning of a pitch, I would do a skit, and it would be like, oh, this hanger, it gives me shoulder bumps and that frustrates me. And this hanger drops my clothes onto the ground, and like, I'm a busy girl. Like I can't do that.
Yeah.
And really just kind of like putting some emotion. It's not just like hangers. It's not just clothes. It's more than that. But yeah, okay, back to process. So with every pitch, I listen to the audience of what resonated and what didn't. And of course, there's like different audiences. You have your customer audience, your investor audience, maybe a mix. But I listen to what resonated, resonates. And oftentimes when I tie it back to emotion, it resonates. I see people latch on and be engaged again, or like lean in a little bit more. But yeah, I usually just like go kind of like, what are the main things I want to add, and then tweak from there based off of each pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so imperative when you're like in an in-person environment and you have to captivate an audience, right? But I feel like a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations could really learn from what is it that you're asking these audience members? What is it that you're listening? What are you tapping into to better your message, to improve your presentation? What are you asking them?
Yeah, I maybe not necessarily asking them, but I think what I'm tapping into is what they care about.
Mm.
And I notice that whenever I communicate that your clothes should be respected because they, in a sense, tie to your self-expression, and you are a person that deserves to be respected, that really resonates. That resonates with me.
Yeah.
Like, it all comes back to me. It all comes back to who they are. And I think when I tap into that, it makes sense why we should care about retaining our clothes over the long run, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's that. I don't know if there's like a particular ask depending on the pitch, but
Yeah. I
yeah,
know it's different, right, for every
yeah,
single audience. Because sometimes you may be pitching to consumers, and sometimes you may be pitching to strategic partners, and the message needs to be adapted to each one of them. And so
true.
there has to be elements that resonate for all of those audience members, but people can adjust their message to fit that particular market or that particular audience if you're just speaking to them.
Exactly. I think if you have core pillars, which ours currently are respect, love, and peace of mind,
Mm-hmm.
like everything always comes back to that, like having kind of your core things that people can always like rely on you on, but then adjusting to like whatever the needs of that audience are, like what they want to hear, because an investor is going to want to hear something different than a customer, than like maybe mentors. But yeah, I think having your core kind of toolbox and then editing from there.
Yeah. Well, moving on to kind of where you that message that you're kind of delivering in the accelerators, and now that you've kind of broken out of that a little bit and getting into actually having product and moving on, at what point did you recognize the need for having a marketing strategy and a brand strategy?
I think that's a good question. Very early on. Like I wouldn't say right when I created the product,
Mm-hmm.
but when I was starting to think about who it was for, then I was like, oh, what kind of brand do I want Hangyo to be?
Mm.
And I ended up landing on a more of the premium kind of side because I saw that those are that's the audience that like really wants to tap into what we have to offer,
Mm-hmm.
and also the product it is of premium quality as well. So I think maybe when I started to do more customer discovery and narrow in on who it was for and what I wanted to build for them, that's really when it kind of clicked and I was like, okay, I need to get a designer and like go through the process of figuring out what brand do I want to create and present to the world based off of who I want to serve.
Yeah, and that goes back to the importance of listening,
Yeah.
right? When you create a brand, when you create a marketing strategy, you have to be very considerate of who your market is, and you have to be available to them at their level of what they want out of your service, your product, your offering, right?
Yeah, I think it's that, and but also I think maybe more recently I've thought about like also presenting who you are too, which may not always acquiesce to what people like exactly want, but like presenting who you are authentically too, while balancing like wanting to serve who that customer is, I think is also a key thing. Because like our brand, for example, it's a little bit more playful, and that's kind of a risk a little bit with our brand in a sense, but we found that people really like that,
Mm-hmm.
that we're more of a playful, vibrant brand. And I don't think that's something that maybe people would have thought about for a hanger business,
Yeah.
something that's hasn't really changed in the past, 100 plus years. That's been super stale. And so that was very, very much like us taking a risk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think whenever you're creating strategy, you're creating your brand, in a sense, if you want to stand out and really make a statement, really leave a legacy, I think you have to take some risks as well.
Yeah, you do. You have to position yourself as unique and different, right? That's kind of what separates you from competitors, right?
And undaunted.
And undaunted.
Undaunted. Plug.
So that gets back to if I could make this analogy, right? The brand that you create is kind of very similar to like the clothes that we wear, right? It's presenting your best self. You're really wanting to communicate something based on your personality, who you are, and I feel like branding is very similar for your organization, right?
Yeah.
Your solution and your products are really important, right? But they need to be presented properly to the right person, and it really works out well. Yeah,
I agree.
So, moving from understanding that, there's a kind of a startup environment, right? And that's really where you and I met, that startup environment. Both you and I kind of had small businesses in college, and we were trying to make it big. And get it going, right?
Yep.
From what point do you move from being a startup to being a business? And should you ever get, should you ever move away from being a startup?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm forgetting who says this. Maybe it's from my Steve Blank readings, but a startup he mentioned is you're in learning mode. That's your number one goal.
Yeah.
Like you're just trying to get as much insight and make sense of it. Of do I have something that's repeatable? Do I have something that people actually want multiple times? Or I can serve enough people to make this a profitable business. So I think in startup mode, you're really just like learning a lot. Like I'm still learning a lot too. But yeah, I think you're just trying to learn like, okay, what's my branding? What's my strategy? Who's my customer quite really?
Mm-hmm.
Is this the right product? What can I define even more? I think you're just like trying to take it all in and make sense of it and evolve like how you move forward
Mm-hmm.
as a result. And then I think a business is once you have like a really, really strong grasp of those core things that you need to know, like unit economics and customers and where you're going to be selling, distribution strategy, marketing strategy, that and you can and it's something that's kind of like an engine that's repeatable. That's when I think you're kind of evolving into more of a business mode. And then to your second question of should you ever like leave startup phase,
Mm-hmm.
is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, no, never,
Yeah.
never. Never. I think
I agree with you.
yeah, I think for businesses to just continue to evolve and stand the test of time, you kind of have to keep your ear close to the ground and always be on your toes in a sense of like constantly listening to customers. What can I improve and edit? How can I pivot? How can I adjust with like how the market goes? And I think that's more so the cadence and the dance of a startup. And I feel like that should never be lost like with any stage of business, even if it's not as pronounced. Like I think that's important to keep that heart of a startup throughout any stage.
I agree. I agree. And I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My parents, like you mentioned, they have a restaurant and they've had that restaurant for 20 years now.
Yeah.
And so it's always been a business. It's like you start a small business and you make it, profitable for you and you live your life and you're happy, right? And that's kind of been the core of it. And so in college, when I started my mobile dog grooming business with my then fiance, and now she's my wife, the thought was always you have a business, you make it grow, and it was great. We launched and we had a lot of success early on, but it was always beholden to the wave of how things are going, right? And it wasn't until I met you actually that I understood more of what the startup process was and how you should have an ear to the ground. You should learn how to be adaptable, how to bring in other resources and how to collaborate, that we started really understanding what it meant to be a startup and delineating between a startup and a business. And that was really powerful. By then we were kind of burnt out 3 years, working while in college. It was
It's a lot.
it was
You guys
lot.
did a lot. And y'all had multiple, right?
Yeah, we had two.
Wow.
So that was
Yeah.
It was a lot of learning for us because we were just thinking of it as a small business that could run on its own. But when you start thinking about it just as a small business, you are kind of locked into that forever, right? And what's great about the startup mentality is you do have room for growth and you have room for change. And that was super impressive to me. Yeah.
Wow. I'm glad you took something away.
I took so much away from
Great.
our experiences. When we first met, you're very like analytical and you have a lot of like these like, processes in place. And me, I'm just kind of like, let's
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. Yeah. all the memories are coming back. Yep.
Yeah,
I remember.
I was just like, we're talking about it a lot. We got a lot of plans,
Yep.
but we should just do it. And, now that I'm a business owner again, and, I really subscribe to the startup and to the agile model of doing things, I take a lot of what you've taught me about how to make that process effective for my team, for our clients. And so I kind of balance it out. You kind of balance me out where I'm just not just like, let's do it. It's like, okay, let's get a good plan in place and then let's do it. Yeah. And so,
I think in the same sense, you also helped me have more of a bias to action because, as you mentioned, I'm more of the analytical, dare I say, perfectionist recovering one. And that's not always conducive for running a startup.
yeah.
Like, you need to move. That's how you learn. That's how you get better. And so I would say, like, after meeting you, like, yeah, I became a lot more action oriented and still had the balance of my analytical, but it was less paralyzing for, moving forward. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that was mutual.
So when you're thinking about how you create how you created Hangyo, how you're now growing your business, still with the startup mentality, who or what influence you on a day-to-day basis? What are your influences when you make decisions?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Like, I read the question beforehand. It was really good when you say it again. um, I think, yeah, definitely top of mind is my customer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always listening to what they have to say. What don't you like? What do you like? What do you use this for? Like, always listening to that. And I think they influence me the most because they're who I'm serving. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're the reason why this business exists, is because I want to make their lives better. So I would say them. I also think kind of the mindset around lean startup. So like Eric Ries's book, Customer Discovery with Steve Blank, a lot of that is entrenched into what I do and how I view my business, as well as like kind of doing like tests and learning, like massive learning, and being really attuned to the customer. So I would say like that, like breadth of like work of just like lean startup and customer discovery. I did this accelerator called Tacklebox, and they do a lot of like that kind of work with customer intent testing. Like, I really like that, and that influences me a lot too.
Very cool. It's awesome that you're that it goes back to being very connected with your clients, right? And sometimes people kind of lose a little bit of that as they grow. They kind of start being like, no, we're our product, we're our services, and that starts getting away from why you started your business in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that that happens to a lot of organizations. Is there any advice you would give to somebody, a team who is maybe shifting into kind of thinking less about the clients and needing to kind of come back in and think about the customer?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you on that. That happens. I think it's actually easy to do that though, like to
Mm-hmm.
be kind of consumed by the product. That's actually how I started until the the Texas Tech team was like, no, 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 no. Like, it's not
Yeah.
about your product. It's about the problem that you're solving. Be passionate about the problem, not the product. So I would say maybe my advice goes back into like, what have people said?
Mm-hmm.
Like, take yourself out of it for just a second. And what is your customer base saying?
Mm-hmm.
Stuff that you want to hear, stuff that you don't want to hear. Like, what are they saying? And is what you're doing, your strategy, aligned to that? I think a lot of it comes back to alignment. Am I building what the end customer actually wants? And think about it, like customer, client, like we're all in business to serve them.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're not serving them in the best way, then that influences the progress of the business. So I would say like go back to what people are saying. Like for me, I've always captured like what people are saying, and I use that as a data point. I don't use my own views as a data point as much, because I'm not gonna just buy all the hangers. Like, I want other people to
Yeah.
have the hangers. So I would say that. Like, what are your customers saying?
Very cool. Well, I am really happy to have talked to you a little bit and learn a little bit about the startup. And is there anything else that maybe I didn't ask that you want to talk about?
Um, I think like I always say this towards the end of things, but I guess for someone who is starting a project or thinking about starting a project slash business, I would really, really encourage them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it doesn't work out, just do it. Because 5 or 4 years ago, I like never would have imagined that I would be here, like talking to you about my business and my journey if I hadn't taken that leap of faith of like, okay, I think there's something here, maybe I could pursue it. And so I would just kind of encourage and emphasize that, because I think things could be completely different if I didn't just take those like little baby steps. And it's taken so much time too to build where I'm at. Like it took about 3 years to really build the product and launch it out into the market. And even still, I'm making like changes and additions to it. But I would say that if I had to like leave any other piece of advice, it's just like, go, just go, try it, do it. Take Jonathan's like way of doing it. Just go, bias to action.
And that, you know, that is you getting to actually do something. You know, that's why we have R&D budgets, right? Research and development, and having a good, healthy R&D budget just to fail, right? Failing is really, really important, and I've recognized the importance of failing, because you come out the other end much stronger. You know what doesn't work. You got all of the bad ideas out, and now you can kind of make room for good ideas.
I agree. And it's helpful to do that in community too. Because I remember when we were like going through customer discovery, trying out different ways of like building out the product. It wasn't a solo process. It wasn't a silo. It was like, it was done in a village. Like, so I think that's also a big part of it, is like entrepreneurship. This journey is also a lot about people who are building with you. It's never, in my opinion, it's never really a solo journey as well. So I think that also that's a big thing as well, is like, yes, like failing, but also not doing it solo, doing it in community with other people.
I love that you said the community, right? Because that is really what makes it stronger.
Yeah.
Organizations don't see themselves sometimes as community, but you're in partnerships with your vendors, you're in partnership with your clients, and making it all a success.
Yep.
And if you don't have that, it's really, really difficult.
Really, really hard. Yeah. It takes a team.
It takes a village.
It takes a village. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to take some time to plug your podcast, because I know you're having a new season.
Thank you. This summer.
Styled by Science CEOs.
Correct.
And when is your next episode coming out?
We're actually doing a mini series, and we're planning on rolling that out at the end of this month. So we're doing micro conversations with some people who are also in the community, change makers as well. And they're these 30-minute coffee conversations with people who are like friends of ours, like in the community, doing great things. And so we're rolling that out in about 2 weeks. But then our full season, like longer length episodes, will be rolling out this summer.
Yeah. The podcast is so great too.
Oh, thank you.
I listened to episode 4 with Hannah, I think.
Yes.
She's from Guatemala, and she's working on sustainable fashion.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And it's just so amazing to see that she's kind of bringing her culture into what we, here to the States, and providing a good connection for that community, good resources.
Yeah, Hannah's great. Incredible story, and what she's doing is amazing. Yeah. Definitely.
So thank you so much, Io, for being here. I really appreciated learning more about you and your startup, and kind of your process of taking your business to the next level.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to our listeners. We hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about Io today. For notes and more information on what we discussed today, head over to undeniableculture.com. There you'll find more episodes as they come out. Stay cultured, and we will see you next time.